Have you ever wondered what others truly perceive about you? Not what you say, not what you do, not even the image you try to project. I'm talking about the energy you radiate without even realizing it, the essence that lingers when you're present. Have you ever stopped to consider how your energy influences those around you, shaping the world in ways you might never notice? We often believe that our identity is defined by our appearance, our actions, or the words we speak. But in reality, it goes much deeper. Society has conditioned us to think that who we are is based on what we show, on the achievements we accumulate, on the image we construct. However, Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in psychology, spoke of something far more significant: individuation. For Jung, individuation is a journey of uncovering our true selves beyond external expectations, fears, and the shadows that haunt us. It's not about becoming someone new, but about peeling away the layers imposed upon us and remembering who we have always been. And while that may sound simple, it is often a difficult and challenging process. From the moment we are born, the world begins shaping us. As children, we are taught to fit in, to follow rules, to meet expectations. We become characters in a story we didn't write. Jung referred to this as the masks we wear, the roles we adopt to navigate society. We put on different faces depending on the situation. One at work, another with family, another with friends. And over time, we lose sight of what lies beyond those masks, the raw, unfiltered version of ourselves that has been waiting to emerge. If you've ever felt out of place, as if something deep inside you is calling to be recognized, it's because your true self is trying to break through. But answering that call is no easy task. It takes courage to look within, to confront the parts of yourself that you've ignored or hidden away. Jung spoke of the unconscious, that vast space where we store everything we've been taught to suppress. Our fears, our unspoken desires, our emotions left unexpressed. Yet, within that same space lies the key to our liberation. Imagine that within you, there exists a seed of something pure, unique, and untouched by societal conditioning. But that seed cannot grow if you keep feeding what you are not. It cannot thrive if you continue shaping yourself to please others rather than listening to your own inner voice. According to Jung, individuation is the act of allowing its seed to flourish, to grow into a tree with deep roots, unafraid to stand tall in its true form. For this seed to thrive, it must be nurtured with self-awareness and authenticity. This means embracing every aspect of who you are, the light and the darkness, the strengths and flaws. But this journey isn't just about self-discovery. It's also about integration. Because within you, there is not only light but also shadows, the anger, the insecurities, the fear of rejection. Jung reminds us that true wholeness comes when we stop running from those shadows and learn to embrace them. We cannot be complete if we deny any part of ourselves. Transformation happens the moment we understand that even our darkest aspects hold value, that they, too, are a part of who we are. The shadow isn't something to be erased. It's something to be understood and integrated into who we are. Imagine an uncut diamond. Its worth is already there, but it needs refining, pressure, and shaping to reveal its brilliance. The same applies to you. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to refine what's already within. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. But with each step you take toward your authentic self, you move closer to a life of depth and meaning. The real question is, are you willing to look inward? To let go of expectations and confront your true nature? Jung believed that the greatest act of bravery is facing oneself, and that is the first step in this journey. But you don't have to do it alone. There are philosophies and practices that can support you, and in this space, we will explore some of them. You might be wondering, where do I start? The answer is simple. Start by observing. Listen to the thoughts that hold you back. Question beliefs imposed on you, and ask yourself, how much of what I do each day comes from genuine desire, and how much stems from the fear of not being enough? Examine your patterns. Watch your reactions. Begin to notice which parts of yourself have been buried for too long. The truth is, you are already enough. You don't need external validation. You don't need the world to confirm your worth. What you truly need is to remember who you are. And in the next stages of this journey, we will dive deeper into that understanding. Authenticity is not just a philosophical concept. It is a transformative force that can redefine how we live. In the previous section, we explored Carl Jung's individuation process and how it pushes us to embrace our shadows and acknowledge our true essence. Now, let's go even deeper, drawing insights from other thinkers and analyzing how this inner journey impacts our daily lives. To begin with, Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, argued that those who find a sense of purpose can endure even the harshest suffering. Having survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, he concluded that life's meaning isn't found in fleeting pleasure, but in the pursuit of a deeper internal mission that gives our existence direction. Connecting this to Jung's ideas, we see that individuation is not just about self-discovery. It's a crucial survival mechanism, both emotionally and psychologically. When we live authentically, we no longer rely on external approval to define us. Instead, we develop an inner compass to guide us. Friedrich Nietzsche, on the other hand, spoke of the necessity of becoming who we truly are. He believed that society imposes values that suppress individuality, and only those who dare to challenge these norms can reach their full potential. In everyday life, we see this reflected in the relentless pressure to conform, working in jobs we don't love, maintaining relationships dictated by others' expectations, and living in constant fear of disapproval. If we take a closer look at our choices, we might realize that many of them are not made from a place of authenticity, but from a deep-seated fear of rejection. Consider someone who grew up in an environment where financial security was emphasized above all else. From an early age, their parents instilled in the belief that choosing a profitable career was the key to success, even if it meant abandoning their true passion. Over the years, this person follows the expected path, seeking stability rather than fulfillment. Yet, despite having a career that ensures financial comfort, they feel an increasing sense of emptiness, their energy becoming scattered and dim. Hunin and Etchy would suggest a clear path in this scenario. This person needs to reconnect with their essence and challenge the structures that confine them. Here is where the courage to face one's fears becomes crucial. The psychoanalyst Eric from identified fear of freedom as one of the greatest barriers to authenticity. He argued that many people prefer the security of established rules over the responsibility of shaping their own lives. And this is entirely understandable. To be authentic is to take risks. It means stepping away from the familiar, making unpopular choices, and sometimes walking alone. Yet, it also means tapping into an endless source of vitality and purpose. Carl Jung spoke of shadow integration as an essential step in individuation, but how does this translate into everyday life? Imagine someone who, due to past experiences, has developed a deep-seated fear of failure. Over time, they have internalized the belief that they are not good enough. As a result, they avoid taking risks, choosing security over passion, and never truly pursuing their dreams. Their shadow, this fear of failure, silently governs every decision they make. However, instead of repressing this fear, if they choose to confront it, observe it, and work through it, they can begin to break free from its grip. In practical terms, this could mean embracing small challenges, stepping into unfamiliar situations, and learning to experience failure without equating it to their self-worth. As Lao Tzu once said, "When you realize that nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you." This is a profound lesson in authenticity. We do not need more degrees, more recognition, or more external validation to feel whole. Authenticity is not about accumulating more. It is about being fully ourselves. When we stop seeking externally what we already possess internally, our energy shifts dramatically. Anxiety lessens, clarity increases, and our relationships become more genuine. Another philosopher who offers a powerful perspective on authenticity is Alan Watts, who emphasized the importance of flowing with life rather than resisting it. Watts compared life to the movement of a river. When we try to control every aspect of our existence, we become rigid and suffer. But when we learn to trust our own natural rhythm, things start falling into place effortlessly. This does not mean surrendering to fate or being passive, but rather developing a profound trust in our ability to navigate life with authenticity. This brings us back to the energy we project. As mentioned earlier, a person who exudes a sense of abundance is not necessarily someone with material wealth or social status. True power lies in those who have worked on themselves to the point of no longer needing to prove anything. Their energy becomes magnetic, not because of what they own, but because of their deep self-awareness and acceptance. Think of figures like Buddha or Gandhi. Neither possessed material riches, yet their presence alone was transformative. Their authenticity was their greatest strength. Authenticity also plays a fundamental role in our relationships. In a world where so many interactions are built on appearances, those who dare be real stand out. Being true to yourself is an act of courage. Jung believed that genuine connection only happens when we reveal our real selves, without masks, without pretense. When we approach life from a place of authenticity, we naturally attract people and opportunities that resonate with who we truly are. It acts as a filter, pushing away what drains us and bringing closer what nurtures our growth. If we want to shift our energy and transform our lives, we must start with a fundamental question. Am I living from my true self or from fear? Are the choices I make a reflection of who I am, or am I simply following expectations placed upon me? These questions may be unsettling, but they mark the beginning of a profound transformation. The world is full of people who live half-heartedly, who have sacrificed their authenticity to fit a mold, afraid of breaking away from the script they were given. But it is also filled with those who have embraced their true nature despite the risks. These are the ones who leave a mark, who inspire, who change the course of history. The choice is yours. Continue conforming to what the world expects, or dare to be who you truly are. There is no single right path, only the path that aligns with your essence. And when you choose authenticity over conformity, you realize that real freedom is not found in seeking the approval of others, but in fully accepting yourself. Throughout this journey, we have explored self-knowledge, authenticity, and transformation. We've come to understand that authenticity is not just an abstract ideal, but a daily practice that demands courage and commitment. By diving into the wisdom of Carl Jung and other great thinkers, we have uncovered how our energy, our hidden selves, and our internal purpose shape the reality we experience. At the start, we pose a crucial question. Why do some people radiate a magnetic energy, while others fade into the background? We discover that the key is not external success, but the depth of authenticity with which one lives. Jung taught that the process of individuation, the journey of integrating all parts of oneself, is the most significant task a person can undertake. It is this integration that allows us to channel a coherent and powerful energy. We also delved into the concept of the shadow, that hidden aspect of our psyche that we suppress out of fear of rejection. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It only strengthens its influence on our behaviors and choices. Accepting and working with our shadow liberates the energy that was once trapped in denial and self-deception. In the second part, we address a new question. How can we transform our energy and live in fulfillment rather than lack? We drew from the teachings of Viktor Frankl and Lao Tzu to realize that true abundance is not about material wealth, but about the meaning we assign to our lives and the relationship we have with ourselves. Frankl showed us that those who find an internal sense of purpose can endure any hardship. While Nietzsche urged us to embrace who we truly are, challenging societal expectations without fear, we learn that the energy we emit is a direct reflection of our inner world. If we operate from fear and insecurity, we will attract experiences that reinforce those emotions. But if we cultivate gratitude, self-assurance, and trust in our path, the external world will respond in harmony with that energy. This does not mean settling for less or giving up on our ambitions. It means shifting the intention behind our pursuits. Instead of chasing validation from the outside, we learn to move forward with the confidence that what is meant for us will come at the right time. Now, as we reach this final part, it is crucial to remember that abundance is not the absence of problems. It is the strength and resilience to face them. It is not about everything going exactly as planned, but about embracing challenges as stepping stones to growth. People who live in true fulfillment are not those who never make mistakes, but those who understand that their well-being does not depend on external circumstances. It stems from the relationship they have with themselves. Every time we feel something is missing, it is an invitation to return to our center. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we can choose to recognize and appreciate what is already present. Gratitude shifts our perspective, revealing hidden opportunities in every experience. When we stop chasing happiness outside of ourselves and learn to nurture within, The energy of abundance naturally flows as a reflection of our inner state. If this message resonated with you, consider taking the next step. Ask yourself, from what mindset am I approaching my life? Am I operating from scarcity and fear, or from trust and wholeness? Transformation begins with a conscious choice. Today, you have the power to reshape how you perceive reality and to start acting from a place of inner certainty. To continue deepening this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more content like this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and leave a comment below. What does abundance mean to you? Remember, you are enough just as you are. Thank you for being part of this journey toward authenticity and abundance. Now it's your turn. What step will you take today to live from your true essence? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video. Trust in yourself and in your process.
Have you ever wondered how many times you believed you were broken when, in truth, you were already rebuilding yourself? How often did you mistake the echoes of old pain for real wounds, when maybe what you feel now isn't suffering anymore, but only the emotional memory of something that once hurt you deeply? And what if I told you that healing doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand revelations, but with quiet moments, and that maybe, just maybe, you are far more whole than you think? One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. Carl Jung wrote those words, and they reveal a truth that many resist. Most people carry the illusion that healing must be loud, dramatic, and filled with sudden breakthroughs, as if the soul wakes up one morning, looks in the mirror, and declares, "Now I'm fine." But anyone who has walked through psychological hell knows it doesn't work like that. Real healing doesn't knock on your door or announce its arrival. It slips in quietly. It grows like a tree, rooted in darkness, unseen, unnoticed, yet expanding in silence, until one day you realize something has shifted, something essential. Suddenly, you look around and think, wait, I made it. I survived. Many people are still searching for external validations, labeling themselves as in progress, as if their inner recovery depended on some official verdict from their own mind. But the mind lies. The ego is always the last to know. The psyche, as Jung explained, works in the depths, where time doesn't move in a straight line, but in spirals, returning again and again to the same emotional point until it is finally transformed. That is why, today, we are not going to talk about steps or methods or formulas to achieve healing. Instead, we will explore the subtle, hidden signs that healing has already begun within you. Even if your mind refuses to accept it, what you are about to hear are echoes of something already unfolding inside. These are fragments of a process that works in darkness, like a whisper from the oldest and most forgotten parts of your soul. Together, we will walk through 5 signs, 5 clues, 5 quiet revelations, almost invisible, yet as deep as an abyss, that show your psyche has been healing for far longer than you realize. And we will explore them slowly, like someone walking down a silent hallway in the middle of the night, hearing nothing but the sound of their own thoughts, like someone who no longer pretends everything is fine, but also no longer feels the need to say they are falling apart. So, inhale. Let the rush fade. Come with me. There comes a moment in the healing process when the silence that once felt unbearable begins to feel like home. It is no longer a hollow space that screams at you. It stops being an echo of abandonment. It becomes presence. Your presence. This is one of the most invisible, yet powerful signs that something within you has quietly reorganized itself. The fear of emptiness slowly gives way to stillness. You stop needing to fill every moment with noise, people, distractions, or endless activity just to feel like you exist. The simple act of being alone ceases to be frightening. Most people run from silence as if it were a ghost, and in a way, they're not wrong. Silence is haunted. It carries all the buried noises, the emotional debris, the thoughts you pushed to the bottom of your soul. But when healing begins, something shifts. What once appeared to be a frightening apparition becomes a kind of intimacy. Silence transforms into a visitor you welcome. Think about those nights when you find yourself alone in your room. No music, no phone, no conversation. In the past, that would have felt like walking into a minefield. But today, perhaps you just breathe. Maybe you even appreciate it. Maybe you even smile to yourself. Carl Jung once wrote that what you resist persists, but what you face transforms, and that is exactly what you have done, even without realizing it. You stopped running. You stopped fighting the dark mirror of your unconscious. And slowly, the darkness stopped fighting back. There is a kind of peace that is born only after collapse. It is not euphoric. It is not the peace portrayed in guided meditations or wellness ads. It is raw, quiet, almost indifferent. It is the kind of peace that emerges when you simply no longer have the energy to maintain masks, when the effort to please others becomes absurd, when the fear of being yourself seems smaller than the exhaustion of continuing to be who others expect you to be. Being alone ceases to feel like punishment when you are no longer a stranger to yourself, and that is healing. This reconciliation with silence is actually a reconciliation with the parts of you that you once buried. The strange ideas, the messy thoughts, the forbidden desires, the vulnerabilities you hated. Suddenly, they're still there, but they no longer terrify you. You look at them and say, yes, you too are part of me, and you continue forward. That is more than maturity. That is integration. It is what Jung called making the unconscious conscious. You are no longer divided into internal pieces that wage war against each other. You are no longer an inner courtroom, locked in constant conflict. You are a home with lights and shadows coexisting. Being alone becomes simply allowing yourself to exist without an audience. And if you can do that now, without panic, perhaps even with a sense of calm, maybe even with a little appreciation, then you are far more healed than you think. But there is something else you need to understand. Has it ever happened that the exact moment you most needed calm, your mind completely collapsed? That sudden loss of control is not only emotional, it is mental. It happens because most of us were trained to feel before thinking, to react before observing, to explode before understanding. The real issue is structural. No one taught us to train the mind the way we train a muscle. That is why every small frustration becomes an explosion, and every challenge feels like an internal defeat. But there is another way of operating, a different structure rooted in neuroscience, applied philosophy, and quiet mental techniques that reprogram your internal responses and place you back in command of yourself. It is a way of moving through the world with awareness instead of impulse, with presence instead of chaos, with depth instead of reactivity. And if you are beginning to feel even a hint of this shift within you, then healing isn't a future you are chasing. It is a present that is already unfolding. There is no announcement, no fireworks, no angels blowing trumpets, no glowing sign that says, "Congratulations, you finally healed from that." The truth is far less cinematic. Most of the time, the pain simply stops hurting, and you don't even notice when it happens. You're living your life, maybe distracted, maybe tired, maybe just trying to get through another ordinary day, when suddenly something shifts. A familiar scene, a voice, a situation that used to shatter you from the inside appears again. But this time, something is different. You feel a faint discomfort, a soft whisper of what once was a scream. Yet there is no collapse, no spiral, no emotional earthquake pulling you under. You keep moving the way someone recognizes an old enemy walking down the street. But instead of tensing your entire being, instead of preparing for impact, you simply think, "Ah, you're still around," and continue walking. That subtle moment is one of the most honest expressions of healing. Healing begins to reveal itself when the triggers stop triggering, when something that once knocked the ground out from under you now only shifts the ceiling slightly, when the storm still arrives, but you finally have a place inside yourself where you can take shelter. Carl Jung taught that trauma doesn't vanish, it transforms, and when it remains untransformed, it stays buried in the unconscious, acting like an autonomous complex, an internal force that takes control of our emotions, our impulses, and our reactions. These forces shape the way we respond to criticism, rejection, affection, or even praise. They make the wounded child within us scream with an adult voice. They make the body react as if the past were happening again, even when the present is calm and neutral. But then something remarkable happens. Not miraculous in the religious sense, but miraculous in a psychological way. The pain slowly organizes itself. You begin to look at that memory the way someone looks at an old photograph. There is still emotion there, of course, but it no longer drags you down. You can tell your story without choking. You can revisit that inner place without losing yourself in it. And this isn't because you suddenly became stronger. It has nothing to do with brute strength and everything to do with integration. A part of your history that had been frozen in time finally began to move again. Think about that old sense of injustice that used to burn inside you. Think about that look of contempt that followed you into every relationship, that absence that infiltrated every embrace you received. All of that still exists, but it weakened. It's as if the wound is still there, but now covered with new skin. The scar didn't disappear, but touching it no longer hurts. And what's most surprising is that when this change occurs, you often don't notice it right away. You might even wonder, have I become cold? Am I numb? Am I detached? But you are not becoming less whole. You are becoming more whole. For the first time, your nervous system doesn't collapse when faced with an echo of the past. For the first time, your inner self understands with clarity. That happened, but it is no longer happening. You stepped out of the trance of trauma. Jung taught that anything that remains unconscious repeats itself as fate. But once we bring what was hidden into the light, we stop being hostages. That is what it means to metabolize pain, to digest it with the soul, to turn it into psychic material, into embodied learning, into maturity. And then one day, you find yourself in the same situation you once feared, ignored, criticized, rejected, tested, and instead of breaking down, you simply breathe, observe, think, interesting, and move on. That is not emotional coldness. That is freedom. That is the moment when the past stops biting, because you stopped bleeding. It is the moment when you stop reacting and start choosing. And here is the most poetic element of this stage of healing. It is silent. You don't feel like a hero. You don't feel triumphant. You don't run to tell someone what happened. You just feel normal. But that normality is everything. It is the relief you begged for during years of turmoil. It is the absence of pain where there used to be a permanent storm. The only challenge is that now that you're at peace, you almost forget to appreciate how different everything feels. So let me remind you, this is enormous. You walked all the way here. You said goodbye to versions of yourself that screamed, begged, and knocked on the doors of your inner world, desperate for recognition. And today, you don't need to prove anything. Not to yourself, not to anyone. You don't react the way you used to because you are no longer who you were. And that, my friend, is one of the deepest signs of healing a soul can offer. Have you ever tried to solve your own paradox? Have you found yourself saying, "I'm so grateful for my life, but sometimes everything overwhelms me," or "I love this person, but I also want space," or even, "I trust myself, but I have no idea what I'm doing." And then guilt appears. Your rational mind panics. Your inner system screams, "Choose, define it, resolve it." As if feeling two things at the same time were impossible, as if contradiction were a flaw instead of a natural expression of human complexity. But Jung saw this long before any of us, and he called it the transcendent function, the ability of the psyche to hold internal conflict without imploding. It is the moment you stop trying to be coherent and start trying to be real. Healing begins to manifest when you tolerate contradicting yourself, when you stop trying to kill one part of you just to let another live, when you accept that within you lives a monk and a wild creature, a child and a cynic, a gentle soul and a force capable of burning everything down. And none of these parts need to disappear. They just want to be heard. For so long, we have tried to live according to an ideal, the perfect self, the self without flaws, the self without contradictions, the self who has everything figured out, but that self does not exist. And the more we try to force ourselves into that mold, the more violence we commit against our own truth. It is inside that internal violence that emotional disorders are born. When we try to be nothing but light, we inevitably turn ourselves into shadow. Think back to the last time you felt guilty for feeling anger, or ashamed for feeling fragile when you believed you had to be strong. Maybe you even judged yourself as a hypocrite for craving freedom while still loving the relationship you were in. That harsh inner criticism isn't clarity. It's the ego desperately trying to maintain a stable picture of who you think you should be. Yet healing begins the moment that voice starts to lose its authority, when your emotional instability stops being interpreted as failure and starts being seen for what it truly is, the natural choreography of the psyche searching for integration. Imagine your soul as a tightrope. On one side, the longing to hold on the other, the impulse to break free. And there you are, living in the middle, swaying, stumbling at times, finding balance at others. What once shattered you now shapes you. Do you understand what that means? It means you no longer fall apart. Every time you notice a contradiction inside you, it means you've matured emotionally to the point of recognizing that truth is never binary. Human truth is fluid. You can love someone deeply and still crave space. You can feel happiness and, in the very next breath, sense a cutting emptiness. And it's all right. Healing reveals itself when your mind stops demanding that your heart behave logically, when you finally accept that the psyche doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals. What seemed resolved yesterday may return tomorrow in a new form. And still, that does not diminish how far you've come. Jung once said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. In simple terms, there is no light without shadow, no ascent without ambivalence. The soul that wishes to rise must first withstand the weight of its own depth. And the true measure of that evolution, your ability to remain with discomfort without abandoning yourself. Before, at the slightest internal contradiction, you rushed to fix it. Now you simply observe. You no longer need to choose between being strong or vulnerable. You accept that you are both, and that this duality is precisely what makes you whole. That isn't stagnation, it's clarity. Contradiction stops being a crack and becomes fertile soil. That's where you plant, where you grow, where you begin to understand others, because those who embrace their own paradoxes judge far less the paradoxes of others. You see someone wavering, being inconsistent, being human, and instead of pointing a finger, you recognize yourself in them. And from that recognition, empathy arises. Most wars, both internal and external, begin with the refusal to allow ambiguity, with the desperate wish for everything to be clean, clear, and definitive. But the soul does not operate that way, and healing begins the moment you stop demanding that it should. Maybe today you look at a situation and think, yes, I'm confused. Yes, I feel love and fear at the same time. Yes, I want two things that cancel each other out, and that's okay, I can hold this. I am this. That space of ambiguity is not weakness, it is courage. It is where true lucidity lives, the kind that no longer needs to understand everything in order to live well. You are no longer someone who has resolved all conflicts. You are someone who knows how to inhabit them without drowning. You are someone who looks within and says, I am not simple, and I no longer need to pretend that I am. And if you've reached the point where contradiction no longer tears you apart, but instead reveals you to yourself, then something inside you has already healed, or at least has learned to live in peace with what will never have a definitive answer. This is not the end of your path, but it is the beginning of a new way of walking, more human, more integrated, more true to who you are. Have you ever realized how long you spent trying to correct reflections that weren't even yours? Someone looked at you with distrust, and you tried to appear more trustworthy. Someone treated you like you were fragile, and you did everything possible to look strong. Someone called you difficult, cold, dramatic, and you believed them. You adjusted your voice, your actions, your presence, trying to fit into images that were never born from you, but from others. These are projections, the lenses people place over you, crafted from the parts of themselves they refuse to see. And you, vulnerable and insecure, hungry for acceptance, tried to squeeze yourself into that distorted lens, like someone stepping into a shattered mirror, hoping to look whole. For so long, you lived as a character in other people's emotional scripts. And the worst part is that you barely noticed, because projections don't come with subtitles. They arrive disguised as honest criticism, well-intentioned advice, poisoned compliments, or silences heavy with accusation. And if you lack clarity about who you are, you absorb it all. You carry what is not yours. You become a container for the insecurities of others. Carl Jung was one of the first to articulate this with surgical precision. What irritates us in others is often a projection of what we deny within ourselves. And the opposite is also true. What others hurl at you with intensity often reveals more about them than about you. The father who called you rebellious because he could not bear to be questioned. The mother who called you cold because she couldn't face her own pain. The friend who labeled you arrogant simply because you knew how to say no. Those accusations shape our identity when we are too fragile to doubt them, and then we spend our entire lives trying to prove we are the opposite of what they claimed. But that, too, is a form of imprisonment. Living to disprove the projections placed on you is still living as a hostage. Healing begins when you finally realize, this is not mine. When someone calls you something, and instead of swallowing it whole, you pause and observe. You take a moment to question it and really feel that phrase as it strikes your skin. But it doesn't enter you, it doesn't pierce you, because you have learned to discern what is a projection and what is truth. That's a profound turning point, almost like an awakening, when the old mirror, the one others held before you, finally shatters. Instead of desperately trying to fix and reassemble the broken pieces, you choose to build your own reflection from scratch, with your hands, your experience, and your vision. You stop accepting these distorted versions of yourself. You no longer play roles scripted by traumas that don't belong to you and never did. There was a time when it only took someone to hint that you were difficult, and instantly you'd collapse under a wave of guilt. But now, you just listen and think. Maybe you're struggling with your own difficulty. This isn't arrogance, it's differentiation, a healthy separation between your experience and theirs, a line that protects your core. It's your soul, learning to set boundaries between what is truly internal and what has been injected from the outside, because others will always project onto you. Always, we all do it. It's inevitable. But now you know where their world ends and yours begins. You no longer automatically adapt to what others expect of you or mold yourself to their desires. You don't feel the need to prove the contrary anymore. You don't explain yourself constantly. You simply are. That solid, silent presence is one of the greatest signs that you are healing. You've learned to inhabit your unique form, not the form others expect of you. Of course, there's a price for this. Not everyone will like your real version. It's less convenient, doesn't bend easily. It may even make others uncomfortable, especially those who need you to fit neatly into the mold you've always occupied. But that's okay. You didn't come this far just to be accepted by people who only see you through their own shattered mirrors. You arrived at this place to remember who you are when no one is watching, and that requires courage. It demands you face your own emptiness without filling it with the gaze or approval of others. It asks you to let go of your chameleon role, even if it means feeling the anxiety of not always being understood. But there's a peace that is born out of that loneliness, an odd yet true peace. It whispers, maybe I'm not who you imagine I am, but honestly, that's no longer my problem. This piece doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need likes. It isn't a performance. It's intimate, quiet, and it can't be transferred to someone else. And if you can already feel that, maybe just in fleeting moments, if you notice when you're the target of someone else's shadow and don't absorb it as guilt, then something in you is free. Something that no longer needs to be seen in order to feel real. This is one of the highest expressions of individuation, the ability to exist on your own without needing to be a mirror of anyone else. Because in the end, the true mirror isn't outside, it's inside. You truly see yourself only when you stop trying to fit into the gaze of others. Healing doesn't always come with force. Sometimes it arrives as a breath, a chill without reason, a sigh that wasn't born from pain, but from relief. Perhaps you're washing dishes, distracted, and you realize you're humming softly. You walk down the street and sense the sun touching your skin in a gentle way. You see a simple scene, a child playing, a dog sleeping, the sound of rain, and something inside quietly tells you, this is beautiful. That is life returning, but not the life you expected. Not the euphoria, not the Hollywood climax, not the magazine cover happiness. It's something else, something more delicate, more silent, more true. Jung called this connection to the self, the organizing center of the psyche, uniting the conscious and the unconscious. It is a state where you don't need to understand everything to feel you're in the right place. The chaos still exists, but now you don't feel the need to fight with it. You walk with it, dance with it, and then an unexpected sensation arises, meaning. But be careful not to confuse it with purpose, as in a grand mission, life plan, or spiritual legacy. Here, meaning is almost invisible. It's feeling that being alive, just as you are, is already enough. For so long, you believed you needed to achieve something. Stability, recognition, security, to feel whole. You thought healing would come with certainty, but suddenly, something changes. You still don't have all the answers. You still feel fear. You still trip over old patterns. But even so, there is a sense pulsing beneath all that. And it doesn't come from outside, but from within. It's a shift in your center. Before, everything revolved around the ego. I want, I need, I deserve. Now, without even noticing, things start to revolve around something greater, something that can't be explained, but feels like a silent compass inside you pointing somewhere, not outward, but inward. Carl Jung wrote about this as a reunion with the luminous, the experience of touching, even briefly, something sacred, something beyond language, yet powerful enough to change your perception. And this can happen anywhere. You don't need to be in a temple. It could be a sigh, a simple coffee, an unplanned embrace. It's the moment you stop surviving and start participating. Where you once saw life as a battleground, now you find a conversation. Even when it challenges you, even when it tests you, it seems to want to show you something, not just wound you. You begin to notice coincidences that feel like messages, signs that defy rational explanation, but touch you deeply. The right book, the right person, the exact word you needed to hear, spoken by a stranger on the subway. This isn't magic, it's perception. It's the unconscious in dialogue with the external world. Jung called this synchronicity. When this begins to happen, something shifts in your stance toward existence. You become more permeable, less defensive, less armored, and paradoxically, stronger. True strength doesn't come from being rigid. It emerges from the ability to open up without losing yourself, to feel without collapsing, to believe even after you've stopped believing in anything. And if you've felt this, even for a second, even if you can't explain it to anyone else, that is healing. It is your soul whispering, you're still here. And despite everything, you can still marvel. That kind of wonder is rare. It can't be bought, forced, or planned. It arrives when you least expect it, after gray days, internal defeats, moments when you thought nothing could possibly matter anymore, and then something small, almost insignificant occurs, and you want to stay. Not to run, not to disappear, but to stay. This is the journey, staying present for yourself in those quiet moments where you can truly see the miracle of existence in the simplest things, And from that awareness, find the courage to keep living, not as a reflection, but as the original, the one who finally recognizes their own face. That longing to stay might be the greatest sign of all. The yearning to persist, even with no guarantees, to love even when not in control, to care even when nothing is returned, to live even when the how is unknown. This is not shallow optimism, nor is it toxic positivity. It's a whispered yes to life, a yes that may be weary, yet is still a yes. And if that yes has already arisen within you, even if shy, even if unstable, then you've returned. You've come back to life, not as before, but as someone who has crossed the desert and now hears water running inside themselves. You made it to this point. You read or listen to every word. You accompanied every layer revealed on this silent journey called healing. And perhaps, without fully noticing, some part of you recognized itself, remembered itself, embraced itself, because deep down, this video wasn't about 7 signs. It was about you, about what has already shifted inside you, even without making a sound, about the strength that grew in the dark, about the beauty that sprang up in the midst of chaos. Meeting oneself means, first and foremost, confronting your own shadow. Carl Jung once said, "You spend so much time trying to understand why it still hurts, that you forgot to notice that it doesn't hurt as it used to." And now, maybe, you notice the deepest transformation never shouts. It whispers, and it waits for you to listen. You don't need to be someone else. You don't need to be better. You just need to be whole, entirely whole. You are beginning to truly be. There's something I need to tell you. There was a time when I thought healing was waking up one day and feeling nothing, as if the old pains would vanish like smoke. I waited for that day as one waits for a miracle, but it never came. What came was something else. I remember any ordinary morning, a cloudy sky, warm coffee, and a list of things to do waiting for me, everything completely normal, until an old song started playing, one of those that used to break me down, and I just breathed. I didn't cry, I didn't collapse, I didn't fall into a spiral. I simply listened, and in that moment, I understood. I was no longer the same. That was it. Healing had arrived disguised as normality, dressed in everyday life. That's why I made this video, to remind you that sometimes the greatest sign of healing is not realizing that you've healed. If you felt something here, if something moved inside, it's because a part of you recognized the path. And that's why I thank you for trusting me enough to listen to yourself. There are souls who, from the earliest days they can remember, have carried a quiet, aching certainty. This world was not made for them, not as it is, not in the way others seem to belong to it. These are the people who look around, and even in a crowded room, feel like spectators, who sit at family dinners surrounded by familiar faces, and yet sense a subtle distance, like a veil, like something left unsaid that separates them from the warmth that others seem to feel so easily. It's not that they don't try. They try with all their heart. They speak, they smile, they listen, they conform. They laugh at the right times, wear the right clothes, nod when they're expected to, and still something doesn't click. Something essential remains untouched, like a locked door they were never given the key to. And even though others may see them as sensitive, introspective, or even creative people, they quietly carry a certain kind of inner uprootedness, as if they were born in the wrong place or in the wrong era, as if their essence were tuned into something others simply can't perceive. But what many don't realize is that this deep sense of not belonging hides a spiritual strength that very few people truly possess. Carl Jung observed this in many wandering souls. Those who don't find their place in the world are not lost. They are developing a special awareness, a gift born not in noise or external success, but in solitude, in constant searching, in feeling out of place. It is a silent gift that takes shape in nights of introspection, in the feeling of not belonging. Jung called it the awareness of the invisible. It is not acquired through books or experience. It arises when the soul, unable to find a place to anchor itself outside, begins to look inward, like a spiritual radar that is only activated in those who have never found a reflection of themselves in the world. It doesn't capture words or gestures. It captures vibrations. These souls feel what others don't see. They perceive lies without proof. They detect sadness behind a smile. They know when something doesn't fit, even when everything seems normal. They can't always explain it. They simply know. And this sensitivity, which at times has made them feel as though something was wrong with them, is actually the very reflection of their gift. They are not broken, not lost. They're simply tuned into a different frequency, one that is more subtle, more profound. Their soul doesn't adapt to the surface level of things because that's not what it came here for. Carl Jung used to say that some people are initiated by pain, not by knowledge, and these souls, constantly feeling out of place, are pushed to look beyond what is obvious. Instead of trying to fit into what everyone else calls normal, they begin to wonder why normal never made sense to them in the first place. That's when something begins to unfold, something that the external world cannot see. The birth of an inner clarity. It's a kind of understanding that doesn't come from books or teachings. It can't be taught or passed on easily because it doesn't arise from the intellect. It comes from a soul that's walked alone for far too long. And once this inner clarity matures, it becomes a guide, not a guide based on instructions or fixed steps, but a quiet compass that awakens when everything else has failed, when logic doesn't work anymore, and when nothing on the outside seems to resonate. These souls don't need a map because they carry within a sensitivity that tells them when something aligns with their spirit and when it doesn't. And even though they've often tried to silence that voice, to blend in, to follow paths that weren't theirs, they always end up returning to that unspoken certainty that lives quietly inside their chest. What's curious is that others rarely understand this. From the outside, a soul that doesn't find its place can appear scattered, inconsistent, or even contradictory. It jumps between paths, passions, and places. But what's truly happening is that their search isn't for something external, it's for something internal. They're not looking for a physical space, they're seeking a frequency, a vibration that finally feels like home, that finally allows them to be without pretending. And through that tireless, often painful search, they begin to develop a kind of perception that is incredibly rare in this world, the gift of sensing the soul of things. It's not by chance that those who don't fit in are the first to sense when a conversation is hollow, when a life is being lived out of obligation, when someone has drifted away from themselves. They feel it. They know. Not because they're special in some ego-driven way, but because their outer disconnection has forced them to connect with what is essential. And that connection to the essential is what gives them access to a kind of wisdom that doesn't need words, just eyes, just presence, just silence. That inner silence that marks these souls is not emptiness, it's depth. It's a sacred space where truth doesn't need to scream to be understood, where answers don't come from outside, but rise gently from the very center of being. That's why, so often, these people can't follow conventional advice. What works for others suffocates them. What others call success feels like disconnection, because the soul born with this gift didn't come to follow pre-made paths. It came to create trails that have never been walked before. And that's exactly why their presence tends to unsettle others, not because they try to, but because their energy, even in silence, disarms everything that's artificial. They can't help it. The moment they walk into a room, their mere presence questions the masks, exposes what was hidden, and makes deception uncomfortable, even if they say nothing. Jung saw this pattern clearly. Souls that don't seem to fit are often the most deeply attuned to the symbolic, the invisible, the archetypal. They have vivid dreams, intuitions that come true, inner visions that guide them through turning points. But what's both beautiful and demanding is that this gift doesn't emerge in comfort. It only comes alive when the soul has embraced its own difference, when it stops trying to belong and begins to align with its own unique frequency. That's where the true awakening begins. What once felt like pain becomes sacred sensitivity. What once seemed like loneliness turns into communion with the unseen. What once was confusion transforms into inner clarity. They didn't come to be understood. They came to see what others can't, to remember what others have forgotten, to hold a vibration that may not fit into the world, but is precisely what the world needs most. As this gift unfolds, something subtle but profound shifts in the way they move through life. They no longer chase places to belong. They become the place. A soul that's made peace with its strangeness, its untamed sensitivity, becomes a refuge for other lost souls, not necessarily through words, but through vibration. Some presences heal just by existing, and that's when their quiet mission begins. Not a heroic or celebrated mission, but a sacred, intimate, almost invisible task. To hold spaces of truth in a world constantly inviting disconnection. These souls begin to live from a softer, deeper place. They begin to understand that their sensitivity is not weakness, but a compass, that their discomfort wasn't a flaw, but a signal. What once made them feel out of place was actually the very thing they came to offer. They don't need big stages, nor are they trying to persuade anyone. Their energy already speaks. The way they love, observe, and create is, in itself, an act of healing. And even if they still feel like they don't quite belong, even if the weight of difference still follows them, they no longer betray themselves, because they've realized that home isn't a place, it's a state of soul. A soul that, even without external certainty, has become friends with its own intuition, that even without applause, sees itself clearly in the mirror of its truth. This kind of soul doesn't follow ordinary maps because its compass isn't out there. Paved roads and fixed goals don't work for them. Their path is uneven, often invisible even to themselves. And that's why they've learned to move by impressions, inner whispers, and signals that others don't even notice. When this soul enters a room, even in silence, something shifts. It's not a loud or obvious change. It's more like a subtle shift in the air, as if the energy aligns to a more truthful frequency. People who usually keep to themselves suddenly begin to open up. Those who never speak of pain begin to share it, as if the soul that never quite fit in held the power to create a space where others feel safe enough to drop their masks. And this gift doesn't shine with spotlights or grand declarations. It lives in the unseen, in how they look, how they listen, and how they're able to be present without invading. Jung called it archetypal presence, a kind of energy that doesn't need to dominate because it already lives deep in the collective unconscious. These souls weren't made to fit into the system. They came to remind the system of its humanity. Where there is automation, they bring feeling. Where there is hurry, they bring stillness. Where there is noise, they invite silence. And they do so effortlessly. It's simply part of who they are. But this same quality that makes them spiritually rare also makes them feel lonely in everyday life. While others chase the surface, they feel something essential is missing. While many run after outer success, they long for something real. They refuse to settle for empty connections or conversations that never touch the soul. That constant search for something real, though it may wear them down, is also their greatest gift. Because not finding a place where they fit in this world forces them to build one of their own, to create a way of being that aligns with what they carry inside. It often means unlearning what was taught, breaking inherited rules, choosing paths rarely walked, and even accepting being misunderstood if that's what it takes not to betray themselves. But in that lonely choice lies a quiet power. Because when a soul stops seeking outside what it can only construct within, a certain vibration is born. That energy begins to resonate with other souls who are equally awake. And through that silent expansion, these people start being recognized, not for what they do, but for what they awaken in others. They don't need loud speeches or visible success. Just the way they move through life with that rare mix of gentleness and inner strength leaves a mark that many can feel, even if they can't explain it. Their energy doesn't seek to convince or persuade or dominate, it simply is. And in its presence, something within others begins to soften. As if just by being around them, people are finally allowed to drop their masks, lay down their armor, and remember who they were before the world told them who to be. It's not easy. Carrying this kind of spiritual depth comes with a heavy cost. Time and again, they've been misunderstood, told they were too sensitive, too intense, too different, as if their depth was some kind of flaw instead of the seed the world had been waiting for. And though those words once hurt deeply, now they feel like fuel, because they've come to understand that their difference is not a defect, it's a key. Not fitting in was never a mistake, it was a clue that they came to remind others of what the system had long forgotten, that we are not machines, not just goals and results, not here to fit in, but to wake up. So even when the pain of not belonging still lingers, they no longer see it as a curse. They've turned it into a beacon. And that beacon, though it may flicker under the winds of rejection or confusion, keeps shining because it doesn't depend on being seen. It depends on being true. And when one of these souls remains true to itself, even in a world where it doesn't seem to belong, something profound begins to unfold. Other wandering souls start to notice, not because it shouts or demands attention, but because its energy resonates with a truth so raw, it cuts through all the masks. And just like that, without realizing it, it becomes a guide, a mirror, an anchor, not by choice or intention, but by the sheer power of staying loyal to its essence. It awakens others to do the same. And it is in that moment that the soul, once feeling broken for not finding a place to belong, finally sees that its purpose was never about staying still or settling down or finding a permanent space. Its purpose was to move, to stir, to open. Because its mission isn't about remaining grounded, it's about forging new paths, becoming a bridge between what we can see and what remains unseen, between logic and deep inner knowing, between what the world expects and what the spirit longs for. That ability to see beyond, to feel with intensity, to understand the silence between the words, it's not a flaw or oversensitivity. It's a spiritual intelligence, one that cannot be taught in schools or mastered through techniques. It's something inherited, awakened, something that only blossoms when we finally stop running from who we really are. And in that moment, when the soul finally surrenders to its own depth, life begins sending confirmations in unfamiliar ways. They aren't rewards or titles or applause. They're sacred meetings that feel written in the stars. They're impossible coincidences that defy logic. They're silent signals from the universe, heard only by this soul, because living in truth has sharpened it so finely that what once sounded like noise now becomes music. It finds meaning in disorder. Its very presence becomes a sanctuary where others begin to feel safe enough to become. This spiritual gift has no label, no clean definition, no measurable form. Yet it moves everything when it comes alive. Not fitting in no longer feels like a problem to be fixed. It becomes the clearest sign that this soul was never meant to fit. It came to create a new space, one that doesn't exist yet, one born when you stop asking for permission and start walking in harmony with the quiet wisdom of your soul. And even if the world still fails to understand, even if silence stings and loneliness returns, you'll know deep inside that you are exactly where you're meant to be, standing at the sacred threshold of your quiet mission, where home is no longer a place, but the peace in your own soul. And from that peace, from that inner stillness reached only after peeling back countless layers of confusion, a different gaze is born, one that no longer seeks belonging as a way to feel safe, but instead looks at the world with compassion, aware that many are still trapped in the same mazes you've now learned to leave behind. Because when a soul carries this gift, it starts to realize that everything it lived through had a wider purpose, that the constant feeling of being the odd one out, the different one, the misfit, wasn't a punishment, but preparation, a silent training ground that in the midst of misunderstanding shaped a rare sensitivity, one that reads between the lines, hears what isn't spoken, and holds what can't be seen. And then you finally understand it wasn't you who took the wrong path. It was the world that hadn't yet learned how to hold your shape. But you didn't come here to be shaped. You came to remember how the world itself is reshaped when a soul chooses to live from its truth, unapologetically. At this point in your journey, you no longer seek external permission. You no longer wait for someone to validate your steps, because something within you has been lit, and it won't go out. A soft, steady fire, one that doesn't burn, but transforms, one that asks for no spotlight, but still lights the way, a fire that reveals instead of consuming. This is your gift, awakened only in those who've known the rawness of the soul, who've lived in the margins, in the silence, in the spaces where no one claps. But everything is revealed, a gift that turns you into a guide without trying, a lighthouse without seeking, a sanctuary without saying a word. When a soul embodies this kind of gift, it begins to vibrate at a frequency beyond words. It's no longer measured by visible success, nor defined by labels, nor validated by belonging. She becomes invisible to the eyes of the ordinary world, yet shines brightly for those who, like her, are beginning to awaken. This soul no longer seeks to fill voids, but to share her fullness. She no longer waits for the world to tell her who she is, because she has remembered it from within. She has journeyed inward, toward that sacred place where masks hold no meaning and where authenticity becomes the only true compass. And from that space, she begins to walk in silence, but with unstoppable strength, because she knows she doesn't need to convince anyone or prove anything. Her very presence already brings transformation. Her gaze already opens paths. Her energy is already medicine for those who come close. This gift is not about having answers, but about holding space for the mystery. It's not about teaching, but about embodying. It's not about leading through control, but through the quiet example of someone who has learned to live in harmony with her soul. And though the path won't always be easy, and many times it will still feel like you're alone, like no one else feels this way, like you're moving against the current. Now you know it's not a weakness. It's a sign, a living proof that you are fulfilling your deepest function. To be a quiet light in a world that still screams too much, because there is a kind of strength that doesn't need to raise its voice to be felt, a kind of wisdom that isn't passed down through words, but through presence. It's the wisdom of a soul that has learned to hold its own silence without needing anyone else to fill it, of a spirit that has found value in its difference and meaning in its solitude. When you hold this gift, you no longer ask the world to understand you. You stop needing to justify your depth or hide your sensitivity just to belong. Instead, you cultivate a fertile inner silence where the subtlest truths reveal themselves effortlessly and where every experience becomes a seed of awareness. And from there, from that depth where few dare to dwell, you begin to see clearly, not with the mind that seeks to label everything, but with the soul that feels, that senses, that simply knows without knowing how it knows. This spiritual gift is the ability to see beyond the veil, to perceive when someone says one thing but feels another, to detect the wounds that have never been spoken, the emptiness hiding beneath a practiced smile. It's an uncomfortable gift, because often you'll witness what others try to hide and feel what they haven't realized they're expressing. But it is also a sacred gift, because through it, you can offer presence where there was only noise before. You can create stillness where there was once only hurry. You become a quiet channel of transformation for those who haven't yet dared to look inward. Not every soul is ready for this kind of connection, but you are, because your story, your pain, your inner exiles have shaped you for exactly this, to be a bridge between what is seen and what is hidden, to hold what cannot be explained, to embody a truth that needs no announcement, because it speaks through every gesture you make. There comes a point in this journey when you realize something essential. You are not here to fit in. You are here to awaken. Your discomfort was never a flaw, but a sign. And every moment you felt out of place was really your soul whispering to you, reminding you that you belong to something larger, deeper, and far more real. Souls with this gift are not defined by what they achieve, but by what they quietly transform. They are invisible catalysts for change. When they arrive, something shifts, even if no one can quite explain how. They radiate a frequency that cannot be copied because it rises from having walked through their own darkness and come back with clearer eyes and a softer heart. And that is what sets them apart. They don't need to prove their worth because it's already reflected in how they exist in the world. They don't need to persuade anyone of their path. Their alignment speaks for itself. They don't seek the spotlight, yet they are unforgettable. They don't force doors open, but somehow they still walk through. It's not always about being understood. Sometimes true strength lies in understanding yourself, even when everything outside seems to push you into doubt. Souls that don't find their place in this visible world are actually deeply rooted in another plane, one that isn't measured by possessions or roles, but by vibration and inner truth. When you carry this kind of gift within, you develop a sensitivity that perceives what others can't even begin to suspect. You can sense a shift in the air with just one unspoken word. You can feel sorrow hiding behind forced laughter, confusion behind what looks like confidence. You don't analyze it, you just know, as if your soul were tuned into invisible frequencies that translate the hidden language of the spirit. And that changes you. It makes you more selective about the places you enter, the people you allow in, the conversations you choose to stay in. You realize there are words that drain you and silences that heal. And you begin to choose silence more and more, not as escape, but as truth. In that silence, you start to hear what the soul wants to say. You learn that life doesn't always shout. Sometimes its greatest revelations arrive in the whisper of intuition, in a feeling that settles in your chest without reason, in a certainty that makes no logical sense, but feels too clear to deny. And that's the language of this gift. It doesn't impose itself. It's not taught. It isn't something you prove. It's something you become. Because when it truly lives inside you, there's no need to convince anyone. Your very presence speaks it. Your eyes express it. Your way of being reflects it, even when you're not trying. And slowly, you begin to realize it wasn't that you didn't belong. It was that your place had never been named before. You are the one who came to shape it. With time, you begin to recognize others who carry it too, not by what they say or how they present themselves, but by the depth you feel when you're near them. There's a shared frequency, a quiet kind of knowing. Like both souls remember, they come from the same origin, even if they've never met before. There's no need to explain, because what matters has already been understood in silence. That's when you begin to see what this gift is really for. It wasn't given to isolate you, but to refine you, to sharpen your sensitivity until it becomes your compass, guiding you to read maps others can't see, and to walk paths that haven't yet been drawn. Because this gift is also a call to be a pioneer of the soul, a builder of spaces where others can also rest. Many mistake this way of feeling for weakness. They think someone who doesn't fit in lacks strength. But they don't realize that staying true to yourself in a world that rewards masks takes a kind of bravery not everyone has. To live from the soul, when most live through their image, you need a quiet kind of courage, one born of deep self-love. That's why the ones who carry this gift don't shout their wisdom, they don't preach or dominate. Yet wherever they walk, something blossoms. Wherever they go, something shifts. And though they might not even know it, their very existence is an answer to those who had started to lose faith. You could also call it a sacred fire, not the kind that burns outward, but one that glows within and stays alive, even through the longest nights. It's a calm flame, but it never fades. It doesn't scorch, it illuminates, it doesn't destroy, it reveals. And when it lives in you, everything that once felt unclear begins to make sense in an entirely new way. One that doesn't rely on rational explanations, but on inner resonance. You begin to understand Why you always felt out of place in rooms where everyone else seemed to belong. Why did shallow conversations drain you so quickly? Why did routines, which others found comforting, feel like invisible cages to you? It wasn't that you were wrong, it's just that your soul was attuned to other realities, and anything that didn't match that frequency felt foreign to you. There are souls like this, who cannot stay long in shallow places. Souls who seek real beauty, not appearances, genuine connection, not empty decorations. They live with an internal compass that always points towards something greater, beyond what is seen and spoken. That sensitivity sometimes hurts, because it perceives what others ignore. But it is also the door to a fuller, more aligned, more authentic life, where every gesture, every choice, even every silence, becomes a way of honoring what dwells within. And although you sometimes feel like you walk alone, you are not. There are others like you, beings who feel without proof, who know without having learned, who wake up with the feeling of having a mission they cannot yet name. There are no maps for this path, but there are signs, encounters, synchronicities, and an invisible force that accompanies you, even in your most uncertain steps. If something within you stirred as you heard these words, don't ignore it. That inner vibration is not a coincidence. It's a silent confirmation, a whisper from your soul, telling you that what lives inside you is real, awake, and yearning to be seen. Maybe for years, you believed you were the problem. Maybe you thought your sensitivity was a flaw, a weakness that made you different in the wrong ways. You tried to hide your depth, your emotions, your tenderness. You told yourself to toughen up, to fit in, to stop feeling so much. But now, slowly, you're beginning to understand that what sets you apart isn't something to be ashamed of. In fact, it's your greatest strength. It's your signature, your language, your calling. It's what allows you to feel the world with such intensity, to connect in ways others can't always explain. So even when the path feels uncertain, even when your steps are misunderstood by those around you, keep going. Don't abandon yourself just to belong somewhere you were never meant to fit in. Don't quiet your voice just to make others comfortable. Stay close to what you feel, even when you can't find the right words to describe it. Trust that your truth knows where it's going, even when your mind doubts it. You're not alone in this. Scattered across the world, there are others just like you, souls waking up, remembering who they really are beneath all the noise and expectations. They too have been told they were too much. They too have questioned their worth in a world that rarely sees the beauty in the invisible. But now, like you, they're finding their way back. They're softening into their truth, reconnecting with the pulse of something ancient, something deep and alive that was never really lost, only buried. So thank you. Thank you for allowing these words to walk with you, even for just a few minutes. If something here spoke to your heart, if something here reminded you of the fire you carry inside, don't let it go unnoticed. Share it. Someone else out there might need this message as much as you did. And if you feel called to keep walking this path together, to keep exploring the quiet, sacred terrain of your inner world, then I invite you to stay close. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because what you're experiencing isn't a coincidence. It's part of your awakening.